This is FrontPage with Njideka Maduka, bringing clarity to the headlines, one page at a time.
Indeed, FrontPage with me, Njideka Maduka. Monday morning, beginning of the work week. It's time to get up and go. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. Yesterday was Palm Sunday, and hope you had a good celebration. Next week Sunday will be Easter. Yes, we'll be saying Happy Easter. Christ is risen, hallelujah, something in that realm. Okay, welcome to the front page. On the front page, we talk about issues happening in the country. Via the papers, we review the headlines and get a clearer perspective as to the goings on in the country. So, welcome once again. My name is Njideka Maduka. As always, we have the papers before us, three of them. We have the Punch, we have the Vanguard, and we have the Guardian.
This is FrontPage with Njideka Maduka, bringing clarity to the headlines, one page at a time.
We're punching away with the Punch. On the front page of the Punch, some interesting news. Tinubu at 74. President donates salaries to wounded soldiers' families. Tinubu at 74. President donates salaries to wounded soldiers' families. Well, President Bola Tinubu on Sunday announced the donation of all his salaries since assuming office on May 29, 2023 to establish a dedicated welfare fund for wounded soldiers and families of fallen military personnel. The president made the announcement on Sunday while commemorating his 74th birthday, directing the Accountant General of the Federation to immediately establish a special account for the initiative. Quite an interesting development. Now, looking at the story on the surface, it sounds good. I mean, the president donating his salaries to support wounded soldiers and the families of fallen personnel. It kind of paints the picture of a benevolent and sympathetic president. If you look at the figures Punch is reporting, they said basic salary of the president is about 1.17 million naira monthly. Now, based on my calculation, if you multiply that by the number of months the president has been in office, which is 34 months, it comes close to about 39.5 million naira. And if you calculate the full tenure, that would amount to around 56 million naira. But then that is just the basic salary. We have not talked about the allowances, which according to this report, some are 50% of basic salary, some are 250% of basic salary. Hardship allowance is said to be 50% of basic salary, and the constituency allowance is said to be 250% of basic salary. Now, 50% of 1.17 million naira and 250% of 1.17 million naira. That will amount to about 585,000 naira and 2.925 million naira respectively. When you put them together, that's about 3.5 million naira. We also have statutory allowances, which if you add to the hardship and constituency allowance, we amount to over 30 million naira. The total for the next 4 years is over 122 million naira. Just allowance, which is more than the 4-year salary of the president, which stands at 56 million naira. But we already know the president said only the salary he has earned so far. So that may just be about 39 million naira. Unless, of course, he decides to give up his the rest of his salaries for the rest of his tenure, or even include his allowances. Now, beyond the numbers, the bigger issue for me is the purpose of this kind of fund. The president is saying this is to support wounded soldiers and families of fallen personnel. But the question is, do we not already have systems in place for this? The Nigerian Armed Forces already has all these welfare structures, pension schemes, insurance schemes that are meant to take care of, service members and their families. So ideally, families of fallen soldiers should already be receiving pensions or benefits through those programs. Interestingly, the president acknowledged this. And don't also forget, we also have that yearly Armed Forces Remembrance Emblem and Appeal Fund. So why then do we need a separate fund created from the president's personal salary? Is it because the existing systems are not enough? Is it because payments are delayed? Is it because the benefits are not enough to meet, the current economic realities? And if this is a separate fund, why do we need to include the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation in setting up the account? Are we saying that this is not just a private gesture? Is that why the president is calling on the governors, the lawmakers, private individuals to also donate to the fund? But of course, the question remains, can this money have been channeled into existing military welfare fund instead of creating a new one? Then, there is this broader issue of military welfare in general. Many people already have raised concerns about soldier salaries. I know there was a time I used to hear about 50,000 naira. Unless they have increased it after the minimum wage, I learned that it should be about over 100,000 naira. That's for the lowest rank, okay? Even if they have increased it, that perception is still there that the money is not enough. So for me, the discussion is not just about the donation itself. Is the bigger conversation about whether the military welfare in Nigeria is truly adequate and whether the existing systems are working effectively. If a soldier dies, what does it take for the relations to gain access to their pension and other schemes made to take care of them? These are the issues. When you also compare what is going on in the military with other sectors like the judiciary, where you saw judges' salaries increase to as much as over 300-400%, you ask yourself, why are some institutions seeing major changes than others? At the end of the day, I hope the money is used for the intended purpose, and maybe we can have major structural changes in the military, because it doesn't make sense to be operating different kinds of funds for the military, and at the end of the day it looks like it's not enough. It looks like we're pouring water into a basket. Okay, that's it on the Punch. I was hoping I was not going to speak long on this, but I guess there was a lot to say. Away from that, we have the Vanguard. Interesting development there as well. On the Vanguard, deadline tomorrow, 4.6 trillion naira banks recapitalization sparks sectoral battle for funds. It's all business here. Deadline tomorrow, 4.6 trillion naira banks recapitalization sparks sectoral battle for funds. Well, the lead says Nigeria's banking sector is entering a new phase of intense competition as the 33 banks that successfully raised about 4.6 trillion naira under the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN's) recapitalization program, positioned to deploy the funds, triggering what analysts describe as a sectoral battle for profitable lending opportunities. Now, this is one news a number of persons may not be interested in because it has to do with finance and economy. But the truth is, you have to be interested because you may likely be a victim or a beneficiary depending on how the banks move from here. For example, if a bank refuses to lend to a manufacturing company, which maybe your father or mother owns, that business may not have enough money to produce, pay workers, or even make profit. And when they don't make profit, there is no money circulating. When there is no money, the ripple effect eventually touches people like you and me. So even though it sounds like bank matter, it actually affects everyday life. Basically, this story is talking about banks that have not completed the recapitalization program. What this means is that the banks have increased their capital base. Remember, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, insisted on this recapitalization. The idea is to make the banks stronger so that they can withstand financial shocks. For example, if there's an economic downturn, or businesses start maybe defaulting on loans, or there is instability in exchange rates, banks may start losing money from bad loans. So a stronger capital base is needed so that it will act like some sort of buffer. So instead of the bank collapsing, it can absorb those losses and continue operating. Now that the recapitalization has succeeded, the next big question stakeholders are asking is how the banks will deploy or use the funds they have raised. There are different sectors being suggested. Some people are pointing to oil and gas, others are talking about manufacturing, others are saying real estate, ICT, agriculture. But when you look at each of these sectors, they come with their own risks and opportunities. Take oil and gas, for example. It can be profitable, but it's also affected by the global oil prices, regulatory issues, operational risk. So a bank must consider whether it is safe to invest heavily there. They can also invest in ICT. I know a lot is going on in that sector, especially with fintech guys. We already see a lot of innovation and competition. But are there other startups that have been longing for this kind of opportunity? What are the risks and how are banks calculating them? Agriculture is another major area. It has huge potential because of, food everybody must eat. But it also comes with risk like weather conditions. We already know that. You have storage issues and all that. So lending to agriculture will require banks to properly plan the risk involved there. Manufacturing is also important because it drives employment and production. But manufacturers, we know they face their challenges, electricity, high cost of fuel, diesel, bad roads. All of these factors can affect their ability to repay loans. So the banks are essentially in a position where they have to balance risk and reward. They cannot just, lend their money anywhere. They must carefully assess where it is worth investing. There are also chances they may consider some sectors and neglect others. Now, if they consider some sectors and neglect others, this will definitely affect GDP. And it shows that government will need to do its own bit to make sure that various sectors are attractive to the banks or are attractive for banking credits. Very important. You also have the interest rate, which has been reduced to 26.5% or thereabout, which in turn may reduce the rate banks lend to businesses. So the question would be, will the reduction in interest rate make businesses more willing to borrow? I guess only time will tell. Okay, that's it on the Vanguard this Monday morning. Let's turn our attention to the Guardian. The Guardian is talking about politics. Okay, so we're cutting across. We can't escape this one. 2027 is just next year, and activities are in top gear. Guardian, ADC settles for consensus as PDP scouts for presidential candidate. ADC settles for consensus as PDP scouts for presidential candidate. Now, there are so many things in this story. First, you have the ADC spokesman, Balaji Abdullahi, saying that the party is going to arrive at a consensus for a presidential candidate. And in a way, this is beginning to align with what many people had already anticipated. Because at some point, it looked like the party couldn't really come together because there were just too many strong personalities all eyeing the presidential ticket. You had Atiku, you had Peter Obi, you had Rotimi Amechi. And because none of them seemed willing to step down for the other, it created the impression that ADC was not heading anywhere. But now, Bolaji Abdullahi is talking about consensus, mainly because of the cost involved in direct primaries. Direct primaries can be very expensive to conduct, so the party is leaning towards a more cost-effective approach. But for me, I think this goes beyond just the cost of direct primaries. It's more about whether ADC is truly serious about contending in 2027. If the party is serious, then there must be some level of compromise among the key players. So the question is, are any of these candidates willing to step down or align with another? Now you have Kwankwaso and Rabiu coming together, discussing issues around presidential tickets. It's expected that one of them could emerge as the presidential candidate and the other as vice presidential candidate. Specifically, Obi as presidential candidate and Kwankwaso as vice presidential candidate. The question then is this the kind of consensus ADC needs? And more importantly, what is the real strength of this kind of alliance? Will it be strong enough to challenge President Bola Tinubu based on past electoral figures? For proper context, remember Kwankwaso has a solid base with over 1 million votes from previous elections. Obi pulled about 6 million votes in 2023. The key question is, does Obi still retain the goodwill of those voters going into 2027? When you combine Kwankwaso's votes and Obi's votes, 7 million, which is almost like Tinubu's 7 million in 2023, is it enough? Or do they need to go to Atiku and seek his support? Maybe ask him to step down. I don't know. Because it will play a major role in determining whether their combined figures can realistically challenge Tinubu. Another question to ask is Atiku being played? Initially, it seemed like Atiku had a strong influence within ADC, especially with prominent voices like Dele Momodu, Kenneth Okonkwo and others always speaking in his favor and giving the impression that he has a strong grip on ADC. But now, with this alignment between Obi and Kwankwaso, the dynamics appear to be shifting and the whole process is becoming more interesting. So the big question is, what exactly will happen during the primaries, the presidential primaries? Will Obi and Kwankwaso formally contest against Atiku? And if Atiku insists on contesting, will ADC be able to maintain a stock of consensus? By the way, today we had a detailed radio discussion on consensus politics in Nigeria. I'll be uploading it before the end of the week on my Spreaker platform. So you can check it out via linktree.ee/Njideka Maduka. Just follow the Spreaker platform icon, click on it, and then you will see the consensus discussion. So we'll see how everything plays out. Now, under this same headline, there is also a story about the Wike-led PDP convention, which held on Sunday. Honestly, there is no long talk on this one. All I can say is that I've told anybody who cares to listen that the kind of politics Wike is playing, it needs to be described with a special term because I really don't understand it. Okay, it's something else entirely. But that's it on the front page today. Now you can join the conversation by following me on my social media platforms. Just log on to linktree.ee/Njideka Maduka. Linktree.ee/Njideka Maduka. We'll be hoping to hear from you. We'll see you next time. Have a wonderful Easter and do have a fantastic Monday. I'll see you again.